Now, how secure are the voting systems in the United States? Is there a risk of hacking by people within the US or indeed those further afield? Well, the head of an American cybersecurity firm says there's no risk as the country's electoral system is robust. To tell us a bit more, though, Julia Seeger, our science and tech editor, with me in the studio now. And Julia, do you agree with that characterization then? There is no risk here?
Well, when you talk about cybersecurity, by definition, there is never zero risk. It's always a battle between attackers and defendants. And since the last ballot, both sides, they've notably boosted their actions with tools that are boosted with AI. And so it allows attackers to multiply the attacks, but it also allows defenders to better defend themselves and better identify weak links. So the head of the National Cybersecurity Agency in the United States, called CISA, Jane Easterly, she wants to be reassuring because she believes that even if malicious actors tried, they wouldn't be able to have an effect, a big enough effect on the poll to have an effect on the election results. And the reason why is because of all of the changes that have been added to the information systems in the last 8 and 4 years. So what are those changes? We actually spoke to Dan Lohrmann. He's the field CISO at Presidio. It's an American cybersecurity firm. Let's take a listen.
The steps have been taking that monitoring capability at a national level, monitoring of the different websites, the different voter lists, the oversight, the processes put in place are all, been strengthened over the last really 8 years, but certainly over the last 4 years. Voting machines themselves, almost all of them now have paper backup. And so it's like over 98%. It's some counts is like over 99%. And so the idea that you're going to not just have an electronic vote, but there's actually you're going to be recording this on a piece of paper, and then you're going to feed it into a machine, and that machine is going to count your vote. And if there is an audit, if it's very, very close, they trigger automatic recounts. They can go back and look at the paper backup ballot.
So the information system has never been more secure. That's a fact. There hasn't ever been so many checks and balances, but that doesn't mean there aren't still vulnerabilities. If you look at what happened at the DEF CON conference, which is a ethical hacker conference that happens once a year in Nevada, they actually found 40 different vulnerabilities. These hackers get together and they try to penetrate the software or hardware of those voting machines, and they found 40 vulnerabilities. Now, some of them were actually addressed and fixed, others weren't. But what's for sure is that there are always vulnerabilities by essence in cybersecurity. CISA is going to be monitoring very closely all of the incoming, outgoing traffic of all states, especially in those swing states where a security breach could have the most significant impact.
And what about foreign interference then, Julia?
That's also a fear, and it has been since, of course, the 2016 elections. If you look at the 1,000-page report that was on Russian interference that was released by the Senate Intelligence Committee, where you have, of course, both Democrats and Republicans, they found traces of Russian hackers in the information systems of over 20 states. Some of them were superficially probed, but other were completely hacked, like in Illinois, for instance, where hackers were able to get access and modify electoral rolls. So what authorities say today is that they were able to catch that early on. Now, the finger was actually pointed to a Russian-affiliated group called APT28, also known as Fancy Bear. And this is a group that we also found during the 2020 elections between Joe Biden and Donald Trump. Now, what was quite different during the 2020 elections is that there were new hacker groups that were identified. Vault Tycoon, for instance, they're believed to be affiliated to Beijing, but also Phosphorus. They emanate from we believe that they emanate from Iranian intelligence services, because all of this, of course, is happening in cyberspace, so it's not always easy. What's interesting is that the goal of all of those cyber operations during the 2020 elections, it wasn't too much to try to change the outcome of the vote. It was more espionage, to try to figure out what were, the stance of the different positions of the different candidates if they were to win the White House. And here you see the three different hacker groups. Of course, there were others, but all of them were affiliated to different countries, and that really did happen in a big way in the 2020 elections.
And look, so during this election, experts then are fearful of espionage operations, but also increasingly something that's known as cyber influence.
Well, since the beginning of the campaign, we've actually seen espionage operations. The most sophisticated one happened a couple of months ago. It was a Chinese state-affiliated hackers called Salt Typhoon. Now, of course, they change names all the time, but what they did is that they were able to record conversations of members of both campaigns by breaking and hacking American phone operators like AT&T and Verizon. We're going to be hearing a lot about that specific attack, but you're right to say that beyond espionage, we've been seeing a lot of cyber influence operations. Just to give you the major trends when it comes to hacker groups affiliated to the Russian state, at first they tended to focus on the Trump campaign, but when Kamala Harris got into the race, they really turned towards her, and now we're seeing all of these deep fakes coming out. And for instance, with a troll farm called Storm 1516, and you're seeing all these videos perpetrating her involved, as you're seeing here, involved in a hit-and-run accident. Of course, this was actually fake. It was a fake testimony. Iranian actors, they've been focusing quite a lot on the Trump campaign, and they've been hacking also information from the members of the campaign and creating these false websites like Neo Thinker. So they act like they're a media outlet, but they're not, in fact. And when it comes to Chinese actor, what's interesting is that they've been really focusing on down-ballot candidates, so people in Congress, for instance, and specifically those who advocate anti-China policies. Now, as a conclusion, what's interesting is that these cyber influence operations are becoming more sophisticated. The goal is to aggravate the political divisions, but also to cast doubt on the integrity of the election result. We have to bear that in mind, and at the same time, we still have to question the resilience of the information system because, as I said, there is never zero risk in cybersecurity, and hackers are always trying to find a new vulnerability for a security breach.
All right, an important aspect then of this election story. Thanks very much, Julia Seeger, for us there.